Mainstream history gives us a clean timeline. Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, Rome, civilisation neatly packaged and accounted for. But geological evidence tells a very different story. One that suggests Earth has hosted no fewer than 12 major civilizations before ours got started. And the strangest part? Most of them didn't fade slowly. They just stopped, suddenly, completely, as if something hit a reset button on the entire planet. Today we're going through all 12, where they were, what they built, and what erased them. Because when you line them up, a pattern forms that's hard to explain away. Let's get into it. We start in the far north. Long before anyone drew maps of the Arctic, ancient writers were describing a civilization up there that had no business existing. Herodotus wrote about it. So did Pindar and Pliny the Elder. They called it Hyperborea, a land beyond the reach of the north wind. Here's the thing. These weren't describing frozen tundra. They described a warm, fertile paradise where the sun didn't set for half the year, where people lived in harmony and, by some accounts, for up to 1,000 years. Somewhere in what we now call the Arctic Circle, stretching as far east as Siberia. That doesn't line up with anything we know about those regions today. So either the ancient Greeks were collectively making things up, or something about that part of the world was fundamentally different back then. The Hyperboreans were described as luminous beings with advanced knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and engineering. The most unsettling evidence? The Mercator maps from the 1500s show an ice-free Arctic continent with 4 rivers flowing from Central Mountain. How did 16th century cartographers know what was under the ice, unless they were copying from much older maps made by people who had actually been there? Modern ground-penetrating radar beneath the Greenland ice sheet has detected formations that look geometric, artificial, while Hyperborea froze over. Deep in the jungles of Central America, a civilization was quietly doing things that should have been impossible. The Maya appeared around 2000 BCE, spreading across Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras. By 250 CE, they were building cities housing tens of thousands. Tikal, Palenque, full metropolises. But it's not the scale that stops you. It's the precision. The pyramid at Chichen Itza casts a serpent shadow exactly twice a year at the spring and autumn equinox. The Temple of Kukulkan has exactly 365 steps. Not decorative choices. These buildings were functional, astronomical instruments. They invented the concept of zero, which took old world civilizations centuries longer to develop. And there, calculation of Venus's orbital cycle came out to 583.92 days. Modern astronomy says 583.93. Less than one day, off over 500 years of naked eye observation, without a telescope. Then around 900 CE, something broke. Cities abandoned mid-project. Temples left unfinished. The collapse was widespread and strangely synchronized across many different locations. Drought, warfare, and political breakdown have all been proposed. None of them fully closed the gap if the Maya's collapse was gradual. This next one was the opposite. One day, one night, gone. In 360 BCE, Plato released Timaeus and Critias. He didn't present Atlantis as mythology. He presented it as documented history, passed down from Egyptian priests to the Greek statesman Solon around 600 BC. Atlantis existed 9,000 years before his time, making it over 11,000 years old. What he described was staggering. An island empire larger than Libya and Asia combined, beyond the Strait of Gibraltar, built in concentric rings of land and water, walls coated in rare metals, a naval force that dominated the Mediterranean. Then arrogance set in, and in a single day and night of misfortune, the island sank. For 2,400 years, people argued over whether any of it was real. Then in 2013, divers found circular structures off Spain matching Plato's descriptions. In 2014, A shipwreck near Sicily yielded 87 ingots of orichalcum. The rare metal Plato said coated Atlantis' walls, previously dismissed as mythological. Now, they were pulling it out of the Mediterranean. What if he wasn't wrong? Most people in the Western world have never heard this name, which is strange because it may be one of the most well-documented lost worlds in existence. Kumarikandam, the ancient homeland of the Tamil people of southern India. According to the 15th century Skanda Purana, Kumarikandam was a vast landmass stretching south of India, connecting what we now know as Madagascar, India, and Australia, divided into 49 territories. The Tamils, credited as the birthplace of their language and culture, one of the oldest on earth. 3 great Tamil Sangams, literary academies where scholars gathered to preserve knowledge, were held there. Then the ocean took it back, not in one flood, but 3, each worse than the last, forcing survivors further north, until there was nothing left. Here's where it stops being legend. Between India and Sri Lanka sits Adam's Bridge, an 18-mile chain of limestone formations that genuinely looks like it could have been a land crossing. Marine archaeologists have found submerged structures off the Tamil Nadu coast, and the ancient city of Poompuhar, mentioned repeatedly in Tamil literature, was found underwater exactly where the text said it was. Geological support? 14,500 years ago, sea levels were roughly 400 feet lower than today. When the last ice age ended and glaciers melted, coastlines worldwide drowned. The timing of the Tamil flood legends aligns almost perfectly with that global event high in the Bolivian Andes. At 12,549 feet above sea level sits a city that shouldn't have been able to exist. Tiwanaku. At its peak around 800 CE, it housed up to 20,000 people in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. They built pyramids, carved enormous stone gates, and engineered water systems that still function today. Impressive, but nothing at Tiwanaku prepares you for what's next door. Pumapunku, stone blocks weighing over 100 tons, some stretching 26 feet long, fitted together with meter precisión, no mortar, no gaps, interlocking H-shaped grooves and right angles so exact they look machine-made. Modern engineers openly admit they'd struggle to replicate it. Some researchers have pointed out that certain blocks appear poured or cast rather than carved. The surfaces are too consistent for hand tools. Arthur Poznansky spent decades on-site and concluded from astronomical alignments that Tiwanaku was originally built around 15,000 BC, long before any civilization should have existed anywhere near that region. Mainstream archaeology says stone hammers and copper tools, but nobody has demonstrated how you achieve sub-millimeter accuracy across 100-ton stones with stone hammers and copper tools. That gap has never been closed. Everything so far sits on land that can be traced. Mu is different. Mu was allegedly an entire continent across the Pacific Ocean, from the Marianas to Easter Island, from Hawaii to the Southern Pacific. Larger than South America, 64 million people across 7 major cities. James Churchward brought this story to modern consciousness in 1926. He claimed a temple priest in India had shown him ancient stone tablets in a dead language called Nagamaya, and those tablets told the full history of Mu. Its people, the Nakal, surpassed our own civilization in many ways. Then around 12,000 years ago, the continent sank into the Pacific in a single night. The physical evidence cited includes Easter Island's Moai statues, the megaliths of Nanmadol in Micronesia, and the Yanaguni Monument off Japan, an underwater formation with apparent stairs and terraces that has genuinely split the scientific community. Plate tectonics makes a continent sinking overnight essentially impossible. Churchward never produced the original tablets. Mainstream geologists dismiss Mu entirely. But here's what doesn't get dismissed: the design. Similarities between Pacific cultures with no known contact and the flood myths. Over 200 cultures worldwide describe a catastrophic flood at the same point in history. That's not coincidence. That's a shared memory. What if the most advanced civilization didn't build on the surface at all? Agartha, an entire kingdom inside the earth, its own light source, lush landscapes, and advanced civilization, reportedly down there for millennia. Edmund Halley proposed in the 17th century that Earth might consist of nested spheres. By the 19th century, esoteric traditions had filled the rest. But the older roots go deeper. Hindu texts describe the Nagas, half-human beings living in Patala, the lowest underground realm. Tibetan lamas have described hidden tunnels beneath Mount Kailash for centuries. These traditions predate Western theorizing by a long stretch. Here's the part that's harder to dismiss. In the 1930s, the Nazis sent expeditions to Tibet to find entrances to Agartha. During the Cold War, the CIA ran classified operations in those same regions. You don't burn government resources on pure mythology. Certain areas near Tibet remain blurred on satellite imagery to this day, with radar anomalies suggesting large underground structures. Modern seismology confirms Earth's core is solid metal, but the question persists. Why do so many independent cultures describe the exact same underground kingdom? Around 2334 BCE, a man named Sargon appeared in Mesopotamia. His backstory sounds invented. Abandoned as a baby on the Euphrates, raised by a gardener, rose to conquer the entire region. And yet it was real. The Akkadian Empire was humanity's first multi-ethnic empire, stretching from the Mediterranean to the Persian Gulf. They created the first postal system and built governance systems every empire afterward copied. At their height, they were the organizing force of the ancient world. Around 2218 BCE, drought and rebellion brought it down within decades. But the most nagging detail, the capital, Akkad, has never been found. Every other major city from this period has been excavated. The seat of the world's first empire remains completely unlocated in 1136. Geoffrey of Monmouth wrote about Avalon the same way he wrote about real places. Not allegory, geography. The island where Excalibur was forged and where King Arthur was carried after his final battle. An island of apple orchards and people who lived entirely by nature's rules. The leading candidate is Glastonbury Tor in Somerset, England. Before the surrounding marshes were drained, the Tor was nearly encircled by water, genuinely island-like. Artifacts there date to Neolithic times. The spiral, terraces winding up the hill remain unexplained. Natural erosion doesn't produce spirals. Glastonbury also sits precisely where multiple medieval texts placed Avalon's territory. Hard to call that coincidence somewhere between Tibet and Mongolia. According to ancient texts, there is a kingdom that has never fallen. Shambhala, in Tibetan Buddhist tradition, a pure land governed by enlightened kings protected by 8 mountain ranges. The texts don't treat it as metaphor. They give specific geographic markers, river names, and distances. In 1963, a monk named Tulshuk Lingpa led 12 disciples on a physical expedition to find the entrance. None of them came back. The same Nazi expeditions hunting Agartha were simultaneously searching for Shambhala, specifically for its rumored stores of advanced knowledge. The CIA ran parallel operations in those regions during the Cold War. When governments fund searches for something, pure mythology becomes a harder argument to make. Deep in the Arabian desert, between 3000 and 2000 BCE, a city grew wealthy beyond measure. Iram of the Pillars. Its power came from controlling the frankincense and myrrh trade. What made it legendary were its structures, towers of immense height, vast halls, architectural achievements so far beyond anything else in the region, they became famous across the ancient world. That's where it went wrong. Pride replaced caution. Then it simply vanished. No prolonged decline, no record of conquest. Geological evidence points to catastrophic sandstorms or a sudden climate shift that buried the city whole. One more civilization swallowed by the world it thought it had mastered. And then there are the Sumerians, the ones who haunt every historian who looks too closely. Around 4500 BCE, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, a civilization appeared. Not slowly evolved, appeared, already fully formed. Cities built, laws written, astronomy practiced, mathematics functional, and writing already in use. Cuneiform, the oldest known written language, just there from the start. Every other civilization we study shows a messy early phase. Primitive beginnings, gradual improvement, eventual maturity. Sumer largely skips that. They show up in the record as if they already knew what they were doing. Their ziggurats were aligned to astronomical coordinates. They tracked planetary movements with precision. And they divided time into 60-second minutes and 60-minute hours, the same system you and I use right now. That structure has outlasted every empire since. We're still using Sumerian time. Their king list described rulers who reigned for thousands of years, beings who, by any plain reading, weren't entirely human. Mainstream scholars call this mythological inflation. Others see it as a record of something much older. And then Sumer, like everything before it, collapsed, absorbed, overrun, and buried. 12 civilizations, 12 rises, 12 collapses, and across all 12, the same patterns repeat. Advanced knowledge appearing without obvious origin. Catastrophic ends, floods, earthquakes, sudden disappearances. Survivors scattering and seeding whatever. Came next. Mainstream scholars say most of these are myths. Maybe some of them are. But Poompuhar was found exactly where the Tamil text said it was. Orichalcum turned up in the Mediterranean exactly where Plato described it. Pumapunku's engineering still has no satisfying explanation. And over 200 cultures worldwide describe the same catastrophic flood at the same point in history. At some point, the sheer number of coincidences becomes its own kind of evidence.